The man just posted a 2 billion stream milestone on the same platform that his rival is currently suing the parent label of, and Drake's own fan base, not Kendrick's fan base. Drake's is the group actively fracturing in public in real time in ways that are so specific and so documented that a Canadian federal politician had to issue a formal public apology for the crime of attending a rap concert. Let me say that one more time so it lands. A sitting member of Canadian Parliament, Jagmeet Singh, apologized to Drake for going to a Kendrick Lamar show in Toronto. That is not a hip-hop story anymore. That is a psychological event that needs a peer-reviewed journal. And I am telling you right now, when we get to the universal lawsuit dismissal and what the federal judge actually put in writing back in October of last year, you are going to understand that this was never about who won a rap battle. This was about a fan base that got so structurally broken by one song that they are still, in the middle of 2026, defending a man who is on his second appeal of a defamation case a court has already told him he does not have. Everything you have been told about how this beef ended is framed around the wrong question. The question is not, did Kendrick win? That question was answered on Grammy night in February 2025, when Not Like Us swept Record of the Year and Song of the Year in the same evening. The question is, what does it do to a fan base when their guy loses that publicly, that legally, and that culturally, and then keeps losing every quarter for another 18 months? Because we are watching the answer. We are watching it right now. And the reason I need you to stay with me through this entire breakdown is that when we get to the Super Bowl viewership number and what happened to the OVO roster in the 12 months after it, you are going to see that this fracture is not organic. It was engineered by the music, by the machine, by the moment. And nobody is putting these three pieces together on the same table. Drop your thoughts in the comments, hit like, and subscribe. Let's get into it. So let me set the table properly, because if you have been away from this story for even a couple of months, you are behind, and there is no version of this conversation that makes sense unless you have the full timeline sitting in front of you. The beef between Kendrick Lamar and Aubrey Drake Graham, as most people understand it, functionally concluded in the spring of 2024, when Not Like Us dropped and did what it did. That is the surface story, the one everybody knows. That was almost 2.5 years ago now. 2.5 years. And the reason we are still talking about this, the reason I am making this video in the middle of 2026, is because the fan base did not accept the ending. That is the whole thesis of what you are about to watch. Kendrick moved on. He dropped GNX at the tail end of 2024. That album crossed 2 billion streams on Spotify inside 2025 alone, according to Hypebeast's year-end tally. And by November of last year, GNX had crossed 4 billion streams on the same platform. He headlined the Super Bowl LIX halftime show in February 2025 and pulled 133.5 million domestic viewers, which Billboard confirmed as the single most watched halftime performance in the history of American television. He swept the Grammys the same month. He toured the world. He kept working. That is the hero timeline. That is what discipline looks like when it is compounding. Now, the other timeline. Drake filed a defamation lawsuit against Universal Music Group over the release and promotion of Not Like Us. That lawsuit was dismissed by a federal judge in October 2025. Reuters and the Associated Press both reported the dismissal. Pitchfork and Billboard both covered the ruling in detail, and The Hollywood Reporter published the judge's actual reasoning, which included a line noting that Drake had, quote, no concerns using UMG's platform to publish slurs about Lamar during their rap feud, close quote. That is a federal judge on the record. Drake then filed an appeal. Rolling Stone reported earlier this year that Drake's legal team submitted an opening brief attempting to revive the case. And while all of that has been happening on the legal side, his fan base has been out here doing what we are about to spend the next 15 minutes documenting, because the behavior is genuinely, clinically unprecedented. So what are the actual stakes here? Musically, the stakes are that a diss record is now the most decorated rap song of the modern era. Culturally, the stakes are that an entire national fan base in Canada has been publicly destabilized to the point where politicians are getting bullied into apology videos. Financially, the stakes are that Drake is now on his second attempt to sue his own label distributor over a song that his own label distributor released with his own consent to be on the same platform. And reputationally, the stakes are that every time he takes another swing, the fracture gets deeper, not smaller. So the question I want you sitting with before we get into the evidence is this. How do you have a fan base this loyal, this loud, this global, and this fractured all at the same time? Because that is not normal. That is not a normal fan behavior curve. And when you understand what actually created it, you will not be able to unsee it. Let me start with the surface layer, because the surface layer is where most of the noise is, and the noise is loud enough right now that people are missing what is actually inside it. Piece of evidence number 1, the Jagmeet Singh apology. This one broke me. This actually broke me. Jagmeet Singh is the former leader of Canada's New Democratic Party. He is a real politician, a member of parliament. Global News, in a segment that is currently sitting on their official YouTube channel, ran the story with the headline, Jagmeet Singh apologizes for attending Kendrick Lamar concert. He went to a concert in his own country. Kendrick's Grand National Tour rolled through Toronto's Rogers Centre in June of 2025, and Singh, being a person who lives in Canada and enjoys music, attended. Drake, or whoever runs Drake's public-facing energy at this point, called him out, and instead of the politician responding with the completely reasonable, "I attended a public concert in my own city, please seek help," he issued a public apology to Drake for going to a Kendrick Lamar show. And the parasocial patrol out there watching this thought that was normal. They thought that was a normal outcome. Piece of evidence number 2, the Rogers Centre speaker incident, which if you haven't seen, you can pull up on YouTube in about 4 seconds. A Drake fan was recorded confronting other concert goers over what music was being played, physically damaged property, and then in a follow-up video that has now been dissected on every major hip-hop commentary channel in North America, delivered what he framed as an apology that was in fact a 15-minute rationalization ending in the sentence, "Don't play that in front of us. Don't play that in front of him," as in, don't play Kendrick Lamar songs in Toronto, in front of him personally. Piece of evidence number 3, the Now Toronto review from Kendrick's Rogers Centre run. Headline, and I am quoting verbatim from the outlet, "Kendrick Lamar and SZA's Toronto show was a moment to remember, but Drake fans aren't clapping." The subheadline of that review, "Y'all letting him diss us?" is a direct quote from a Drake fan the reporter interviewed at the venue. Letting a grown adult in a public review, referring to another grown adult's decision to purchase a concert ticket as something the community was letting happen. Piece of evidence number 4, the numbers. Because while all of the above is happening on the ground in Toronto, Kendrick's GNX is doing what Hypebeast described in a January 2026 recap as the most streamed rap album on Spotify for the entirety of 2025, with 2.98 billion streams, outperforming the number 2 rap album on the platform. The Super Bowl performance in February 2025 hit 133.5 million domestic viewers, which Billboard confirmed set an all-time record for a halftime show. Not Like Us won Record of the Year and Song of the Year at the 2025 Grammys, which the Los Angeles Times covered in a front-page cultural feature. And in January 2026, Kendrick became one of only 3 rappers ever to cross 1 billion Spotify streams in a single calendar year. Now stop. Stop and look at what we just did. In 4 pieces of evidence, I described a Canadian politician apologizing, a fan smashing property over a song selection, a major Toronto publication printing "letting him diss us" as the fan sentiment, and Kendrick Lamar simultaneously breaking every commercial and cultural ceiling available to a rapper. Those 4 things are happening at the same time, in the same news cycle. And if you have not felt the temperature shift yet, wait until the next section, because I have been holding back the actual insider stuff. And oh, do I have more for you.
The broken ones are really not going to like this next stretch. Because if you thought the surface layer was rough, a politician apologizing, a speaker getting smashed, a national newspaper printing quotes from fans acting like they are in a religious war, that was the polite version. That was me being nice. What I am about to walk you through next is what happens when you leave the arena parking lot and start looking at what the people inside Drake's own circle, inside the industry, inside the media apparatus that is supposed to be protecting the brand, have been doing while all of this has been unfolding. And I need you to pay very close attention when we get to the section about who from OVO has publicly defended Drake in the last 18 months, because the answer to that question is the answer to this entire situation. Now, let me get into the cultural evidence, because this is where the story stops being about fans in a parking lot and starts being about the industry itself, and the people close to this beef have been telling on themselves in ways that I do not think they even realize. Cultural piece number 1, the Super Bowl guest list. When Kendrick took the halftime stage in February 2025, the guest he brought out was Serena Williams, who during the Not Like Us portion of the set performed a specific Crip walk, which is a cultural reference so surgically targeted at a specific chapter of the Drake story that hip-hop Twitter needed 24 hours to fully unpack it. That was not an accident. That was a producer's decision, an artist's decision, a public statement made in front of 133.5 million people. And the response from the OVO camp to that moment was silence. Complete silence. Not a single major OVO artist made a public statement in the week following that broadcast. Cultural piece number 2, the Grammy sweep and the room. When Not Like Us won Record of the Year at the 2025 Grammys, the Los Angeles Times noted in their coverage that the ceremony crowd reaction was one of the loudest and most sustained of the night. The Grammys' own official recap, which is still up under Kendrick's Record of the Year win, described a beaming Kendrick accepting the trophy for what they called, quote, the blistering diss track that topped the charts and became, close quote. Read that framing again, the blistering diss track. The Recording Academy, the institution that hands out the awards, the official body that certifies what counts as musical excellence in America, described the record with the word blistering. That is the industry itself editorializing. That is the machine picking a side. And the response from Drake's team was to file a lawsuit against the label that distributed the record. Cultural piece number 3, the fan base language shift. If you have been on hip-hop Twitter, on Reddit, on TikTok at any point in the last 12 months, you have noticed something. The Drake defense has changed vocabulary. It used to be about the music. It used to be Drake has better hooks, Drake has more hits, Drake has broader appeal. Now, and I want you to actually pay attention to this because it is genuinely one of the most fascinating discourse shifts I have watched in my time following this genre. The defense has become procedural. It is about whether the beef was fair, whether Kendrick played by the rules, whether the media was biased, whether the label conspired, whether the streaming numbers are real. It is no longer a musical argument. It is a courtroom argument. And that shift, that specific shift from artistic defense to procedural defense, is the exact linguistic fingerprint of a fan base that has lost the artistic argument and does not know how to stop fighting. Cultural piece number 4, and this is the one I want you to sit with, the OVO roster silence. Go look this up yourself. I am not going to name names because I do not need to. Go through the OVO signed roster as of the middle of 2026. Look at every artist on that label and try to find a single public statement in defense of Drake, on the record, from any of them at any point since the Not Like Us record dropped. Try to find one. You will find deflections. You will find non-answers in interviews. You will find carefully worded expressions of respect for both parties. You will not find a defense. That is not an accident either. And now, I know some of the broken ones are already typing in the comments, well, artists don't have to comment on beefs. That's not their job. And you're right, that is a fair point. Artists do not have to comment, except that they always do. They always do when the situation is different. When Nicki was in a beef, her camp spoke. When 50 Cent was in a beef, his camp spoke. When any major rap figure has been in a public dispute of this magnitude, the people around them have said something on the record. The silence in this specific case is not the industry norm, it is the industry exception. And when the exception is this loud, you have to ask what created it. Which brings us to the gear shift, because everything we have talked about so far, the fans, the politicians, the Grammy room, the OVO silence, is the visible surface of something structural, and the structural part is where this stops being a rap story and starts being a business story that is going to shape the next decade of this genre. Now I need to change gears completely, because if we stay in music and fans territory, we're going to miss the actual mechanism that is holding this fracture in place. And I promised you at the top of this video that we were going to get to the contract level breakdown. So here we are. This is where the sorcery, as our friend from Torture Talk likes to call it, actually lives. This is where the machine is. Let me walk you through 3 interconnected systemic layers, because no single one of them explains what we're seeing, but together they explain everything. Layer 1, the Universal Music Group situation. Drake filed a defamation lawsuit against Universal Music Group in early 2025, not against Kendrick, against the label, UMG, the parent company that distributes both Drake's music through Republic Records and Kendrick's music through PG Lang and Interscope. That lawsuit alleged that UMG had engaged in what Drake's team described as a coordinated promotional effort to elevate Not Like Us at his expense. In October
2025, that lawsuit was dismissed by a federal judge, and Reuters, the Associated Press, Billboard, Pitchfork, and The Hollywood Reporter all covered the ruling. Drake has since appealed. Rolling Stone confirmed the opening brief was filed earlier this year. Now stop and think about what that means structurally. Drake is currently in litigation with his own distribution partner, his own machine, the company whose infrastructure moves his catalog to every streaming service on Earth. He is suing them, and they are still, right now, in the middle of 2026, releasing and promoting his music. That is not a normal business relationship. That is a marriage in the middle of a divorce that neither side can afford to finalize. And the broken ones out there, the ones defending every move, they do not understand that when your artist is in court with his own label, every quarterly release, every promotional cycle, every rollout is happening inside a legal environment where both sides are documenting each other. That is not sustainable. It cannot be sustainable. Layer 2, the streaming infrastructure and the Grammy pipeline. And this is where it gets genuinely interesting for anybody who cares about how the modern industry actually functions. Not Like Us was not just a hit. Not Like Us was a Grammy-eligible commercial rap single released through the Interscope infrastructure, promoted by Universal's pop and urban divisions, playlisted across every major DSP, and then, when Grammy season came, submitted for consideration in Record of the Year and Song of the Year, the 2 biggest general field categories that exist, and it won both. What that means, structurally, is that the same machine that distributes Drake's music decided at every internal decision point along the way to prioritize the record about him. The playlist decisions, the marketing budgets, the awards campaigns, the publicity cycles, all of it went the other way. And the reason it went the other way is not because there is a conspiracy against Drake. It is because Not Like Us was a bigger cultural event than anything Drake released in the same window, and the machine, being a machine, allocates resources to the biggest cultural event. That is what a machine does. Which brings us to Layer 3, the Super Bowl selection process. The NFL halftime show is booked years in advance through a partnership between the league, Rock Nation, and Apple Music. When Kendrick was announced as the LIX headliner in September 2024, Drake was already publicly signaling frustration with the beef outcome, but the halftime decision had already been finalized. And Kendrick used that stage, 133.5 million viewers, the largest halftime audience in American television history, according to Billboard, to perform Not Like Us
in full, on broadcast television during the biggest cultural event of the American calendar. And that performance is now on YouTube in perpetuity, streamed hundreds of millions of times, referenced in memes, quoted in Grammy speeches, embedded in the cultural memory of the moment. That is not a diss track anymore. That is a monument. And you cannot lawsuit a monument out of existence. You cannot appeal a monument. You cannot get a federal judge to unbroadcast the Super Bowl, which is why the fan base is fractured. Because on some level, the broken ones understand that the monument is permanent, and every move Drake has made since, the lawsuit, the appeal, the fan videos, the politician apologies, and the 18-month spiral, is an attempt to contest a result that was culturally certified in the loudest possible way on the biggest possible stage by the industry itself. And when your certified reality collides with the certified reality of the machine, the fan base is what breaks. That is the mechanism. That is the sorcery. There is no magic. There is only a monument, a machine, and a fan base that cannot metabolize the gap between what they believe and what has been recorded into the permanent history of the culture. And here is the truth bomb. Here is the thing that once you see it, you cannot unsee. And it is the thing that I think explains this entire 18-month spiral in one clean sentence. The Drake fan base is not defending Drake anymore. They are defending themselves. Read that again. They are not defending Drake. They are defending themselves. Every apology video, every speaker-smashing incident, every letting him diss us quote in a Toronto newspaper, every parasocial pressure campaign against a Canadian politician for attending a concert, none of that is about Drake. Drake is fine. Drake is a global superstar with a catalog, with money, with a team, with a still massive audience. The people melting down are not melting down because their guy is hurt. Their guy is not hurt in any material sense. They're melting down because they invested in a version of hip-hop history that was publicly, legally, commercially, and culturally overturned in the span of 18 months, and they cannot metabolize what that overturn says about their own taste, their own judgment, their own identity as fans. When Kendrick swept the Grammys, that was not just a Drake loss. That was a loss for every person who had spent a decade arguing that Drake was the greatest of his generation. When the Super Bowl performance broke the all-time viewership record, that was not just a Kendrick win. That was a permanent public receipt against every argument the broken ones had made in every group chat, every barbershop, every comment section for the last 10 years. The lawsuit was supposed to be the revenge arc. The lawsuit was supposed to be the moment where the legal system stepped in and confirmed what the fan base already believed, that the whole thing was rigged, unfair, manufactured, engineered against their guy. And then, in October 2025, the federal judge threw the whole thing out, threw it out. And in the written ruling, according to reporting from Pitchfork and The Hollywood Reporter, the court noted that Drake had willingly participated in the same platform, using the same slurs, targeting the same rival during the same feud. In other words, the court said what the culture had already said. You cannot claim victimhood in a war you started. And that ruling did something to the fan base that no diss record could have done, because it took the last remaining escape hatch away. There was no more wait for the lawsuit. There was no more the courts will decide. The courts did decide, and they decided the same way the Grammys decided, and the same way the Super Bowl audience decided, which is why in the middle of 2026, we are still watching Toronto concertgoers debate whether it is acceptable for a Canadian politician to attend a concert in his own country. Because when every external certification, legal, commercial, cultural, artistic, comes back the same way, the fan base has nowhere left to go except deeper into itself. And that is what a fracture looks like when it is permanent. That is what the study is. That is what needs to be published in a peer-reviewed journal. The fracture is not about the music anymore. It never was, not really. The fracture is about identity. And identity, once it breaks in public like this, does not heal quietly. And through all of this, through the lawsuit and the appeal and the fan videos and the politician apologies and the 18-month spiral, the man who set the whole thing in motion, Kendrick Lamar, has been almost entirely silent. He has been touring, he has been recording, he has been releasing music that broke Spotify records inside the calendar year, according to Hypebeast's year-end coverage. He performed the biggest halftime show in American television history and let the performance speak for itself. He collected 2 of the biggest General Field Grammys and dedicated his acceptance to the people he came from. He did not tweet. He did
not post reaction videos. He did not go on podcasts to argue his case. He did the work and let the work compound. That is what discipline looks like when it is at full volume without ever being loud. That is what K. the Gray looks like from the outside, a man who does every job to 100% and then keeps moving. One person makes music that ended up in front of a federal judge. The other makes music that ended up on the biggest stage in American television. One person is currently on appeal. The other is on 1 billion streams inside the current calendar year, according to Power 106's February 2026 reporting, citing him as one of only 3 rappers to hit that mark. And I want to be honest about the emotional resolution of this, because I know some of you clicked this video looking for validation, and I want to give you the version of validation that is actually true instead of the version that is easy. The right person is winning. Not because the culture is fair, the culture is not fair. Not because the industry is just, the industry is not just. But because when the person who does the work quietly meets the moment that requires the work publicly, the work speaks louder than the noise around it. Kendrick was going to be Kendrick regardless of Drake. GNX was going to happen regardless of the beef. The Super Bowl was going to happen regardless of the lawsuit. What the beef did, what the entire 18-month spiral has done, is make it impossible to miss. It made the compound interest of a disciplined career visible to 133.5 million people in one broadcast. That is the resolution. The hero rose because the hero was already rising. The villain fell because the villain was already falling. The beef just turned the volume up on both trajectories at the same time, so that even the people who were not paying attention had to see it. And now, in the middle of 2026, the evidence is undeniable. The receipts are permanent. And the study, as our man said, has to be published, because there is no version of hip-hop history going forward that does not have this chapter as its centerpiece. And listen, this is only the start of what I have coming for you on this story, because we have not even touched the next chapter yet. And the next chapter is where this story stops being about a rap beef entirely and starts becoming a case study for how modern music contracts actually get renegotiated in public. There are 2 developments I am tracking right now that I want you subscribed for, because when they land, and they are going to land, you are going to want to hear them broken down here first. The first is the trajectory of the appeal. Drake's legal team is currently attempting to revive the defamation case at the appellate level, and depending on how that ruling goes in the coming months, we are going to be looking at either a very quiet withdrawal or a very loud escalation, and either outcome is a story. The second is the OVO roster question, which I gestured at earlier but did not fully open because it deserves its own video. The internal dynamics of that label, the release schedules, the artist retention, the public silence, all of it points to a situation that is going to become impossible to ignore over the next 2 quarters. If you want to be in the room when we break that one open, subscribing right now is the only way to make sure you do not miss it. Drop a comment telling me which one you want first, the appeal breakdown or the OVO deep dive, and I read every single one of them. Now for the next video I want you to click into, because it directly connects to everything we just talked about. The Universal Music Group lawsuit is not what you think it is. Everyone is treating that lawsuit as if it is about Kendrick, as if it is about Not Like Us, as if it is about the diss record and the promotional campaign around it. It is not. The lawsuit is about what Drake accidentally admitted about his own deal with Universal. There is language in the filing, there is framing in the complaint, and there is one specific allegation in the appeal brief that once you understand what it is actually saying, tells you everything you need to know about the contract Drake signed and the leverage he does not have. That video is up next. If you want to understand why the lawsuit was really filed, not the reason Drake's team gave publicly, but the actual reason the paperwork exists in the world, click that one right now. Because once you see the clause I'm about to break down, you will never look at a Drake release the same way again. I will see you in there.